You know what a supply is.
That's very common.
So the people wouldn't even make missions. As we get started, nobody's here.
I know, I want to see both of you when you play.
I'm not doing anything, I got the stuff, but you don't need to see anything.
Oh, I kind of need to see. Tell these people that we're starting.
I know, I'm not there. Sorry. Hey,
There's your mom.
Sorry. You can share pencils. That all right? Yes.
Been reading about pineapples. I've been reading about Good morning.
We have a real treat coming up in that we are going to look back in time and see how our church began. And with the help of Susan, who's really good about finding things like that. And he is very good at putting things on the screen. This is a step back in time. The video is starting. You want to see it? That's not the video. Oh, that's not the video? Okay, oh, it's in front of us. Whatever. JoAnn starting. No. Okay, shall I go find Pete to start? No, let's wait. You go do some things first. Do it real quick first. Okay, what were the two most common denominations of the early settlers in western North Carolina? Do you have a sheet? This is like school. Yeah.
Baptist and Presbyterian.
I think it was Methodist and Baptist.
I thought it might have been Presbyterian.
The Methodists had all these siders that went forth from the settlements, and there's these little signs. I remember one in Asheville, Asbury.
Yeah.
About how he came riding through.
They had a lot of revivals. My grandfather was a Methodist preacher in that time period. And he had revivals in Croom. I thought that was funny.
He had what?
Revivals.
My grandfather was named for him. He lived here. That's what I know about him. He was named Francis Asbury.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, his family had to be Methodist because later on they joined the Baptist church. I said, no Baptists in this area during that time would have named their child Francis Asbury.
All right, the next question. How many different denominations, or if you want to call it faiths, are there in Marsville now? So let's count them.
Baptist, Episcopalian, Catholic, Jehovah's Witness.
Yes.
Did you say Marcel or Massentown?
Marshall.
Catholic.
Catholic and Episcopalian, those are the two that are sort of off by themselves. Then there's Baptist, right? There's a lot of those that go all the way from
Free will
to
Southern missionaries.
Southern missionaries, yes.
Missionary Baptist.
Okay, what else?
Free will, there's a Free Will Baptist, right by me.
Yeah, there's that.
Is there a Seventh-day Adventist?
What is that one over behind me? What's that church? Is that?
That's Jehovah's.
That's Jehovah's.
Jehovah's Witness,
I
yeah.
think there's a Seventh Day.
I thought there was.
And I think there's Mormon too.
The Mormons.
The Mormons
are-
are
there is.
Weaverville.
That's a Weaverville.
They're Weaverville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mormon thing.
Okay. So they're Mormons.
That's right.
it's interesting that there are two examples of what we would consider traditional Protestant, more, like Episcopal and, Catholic, yes. That's more traditional, older kind of ceremonies and older kind of maybe theology. And then there's the Protestant group, which it goes all the way from very liberal to very conservative. In fact, in the community in which I grew up, there was one Protestant church that was supposed to have snake handling, so that was not.
There's one apparently somewhere here, so it's on the wall.
More in Tennessee.
I have been there.
Okay, next question. Who is considered to be the founder of the Methodist Church?
John Wesley.
John Wesley.
With help from his brother,
Charles.
who wrote lots of. Yes.
And y'all, I have his diary in my car,
Really?
and it is really fascinating. John was run out on a rail because of an affair with a lady
Goodness.
down in Georgia.
She was a lady?
She was a young girl. She was a young girl. And then after they had had this affair, she came to the rail to have communion. He refused to serve her because she hadn't admitted to the congregation what she had done with him. And Oglethorpe ran him out. And he ran him back to England. I didn't realize he had such a past.
Can I ask you a quick question? Is there a Methodist church in Madison County that's more conservative than this one, as far as like?
There are a total of 3 United Methodist churches in Madison County. There is Spring Creek, which is other side of Hot Spring, which would probably be the most conservative. Some might even say it's more Haywood County than Madison County, it's so far out, and really neither. And then there's Bright Hope Laurel, which is sort of middle ground. Year-round people at Bright Hope Laurel are pretty progressive, but the summer crew who comes in for Laurel is a bit more conservative because they come from many other denominations. As a matter of fact, the year-round people recently heard in a meeting that we were more progressive than them, and they were kind of offended by that. But the people who are there during the summer, they would be proud of that because they're a little bit more conservative than we are.
Interestingly, Lisa has served both of those other churches.
Really?
One
Yeah.
served Spring Creek and she now serves Bright Hope.
And that brings up the question of what is a charge?
So that's not big deal.
A charge conference.
Oh, there's a 3-point charge. I know the pastors get something. If you're unlucky, so it must be a very small.
But when Lisa serves both churches, we're on the charge.
It's a 2-point charge.
2 point. Are there 3-point charges?
There have been, one of our friends did a 3-point charge at Barnum.
Oh,
He
okay.
has 3 churches at Barnum.
But the Methodist churches are certainly less predominant. I counted in the phone book, and I counted 3 Methodist churches, and I counted 33. This was the business phone book, 33 Baptist churches.
In Madison County?
It was in the environs of town.
Wow. There's a lot of Baptist churches in Madison.
And then there's the Church of God, etc. Church of God and so forth.
Yes. No, this was just Baptist.
No, I said that there are.
Yeah, Baptist. There are Baptist flavors all the way from vanilla to pistachio. Yes. Okay. And the next question is one that we're going to have answered in a very unique way. When and where was the Methodist United Methodist Church, Mars Hill? When was it formed? So Susan has done some work on
Let's
that.
have a guess. What do you, some of the newer folks, what do you think? Ann may know, Morris may know.
But if you have joined within the past 15 years. When would you estimate that this church started?
61.
1961. Well, we're gonna find out the answer to that question.
We know the answer, and the reason we know the answer is I sort of accidentally found this old directory at my house, and it's the 1971 directory, but it has a really neat history, a little brief history of the church in it, and we've made copies, so if y'all are interested, you can have a copy of it. But this church was organized on May 25th, 1959. Under the leadership of the Reverend James Thurman, and there was no building, it was organized. It began with 18 charter members, and in 1971, this many were living, so quite a few that expired between 59 and 71, and only 2 of those are still alive, and that's JoAnn Powell and Frances Powell. And Frances lives in Madison County, lives in Punching Fork. So it would be nice to invite her on Sunday. She used to be a very active member of this church, but when they moved up there, she transferred.
They go to Bright Oak, don't
She's
they?
right up.
They
They
were.
go to Bright Oak, I think.
Yeah, so yeah, they do. Anyway, the church began with 18 charter members joining together in a ministry to both the Mars Hill College campus and the surrounding community. And I won't read the rest of that. It says, from this small beginning, the congregation has grown to its present, and this is 1971, remember, enrollment of 108 full members and 21 affiliates. I thought that was really surprising. What's the next question?
Who was the first pastor?
James Thurman. He was the one who actually organized it. It's funny because when I was a student at Mars Hill a long time ago, it was about the time that he was here and it was being organized. And they didn't have regular church meetings, but they had an MYF at the college. And I participated in the MYF a little bit, not because I was a Methodist, I wasn't, but because the guy that I was going with was a Methodist. And he came to the parsonage where they had the meetings, and I went with him. So that's how my first exposure to Mars Hill United Methodist Church was with Ron, who I later married.
We're so glad.
Anyway, says initial meetings of the new congregation were held in the parsonage, yes, on Mountain View Road.
So they had the parsonage before they had the church?
Yes, and the parsonage looked just like the parsonage looks now. I'm sure, the inside was different, and I was so impressed because the Thurmans had this really nice stereo system. I don't think I'd ever seen a stereo system. They had separate speakers. Anyway, I don't remember much about the church part. But they soon moved to the Chapel of Holcomb Funeral Home. That's where the town hall is now, on Main Street, where services were held until February of 1960, and that's what Pat and Grady probably remembered. At that time, the church purchased the Preston Springfield property on Main Street here and remodeled the 2-story frame house for use as a sanctuary and Sunday school rooms. The cost of the 5.2 acres, which I guess is what we still have, was $20,000. And remember, that included the house. So the house and 5 acres.
Okay, the house was street and church.
Who else came to the house?
You want to look at that video now?
Yes, let's do that.
This video shows the actual construction, the building, and some of the history of this church. And this video is on our Facebook page, and I had trouble finding it, but of course, he found it. So he probably put it on there. Did you put that on there?
I don't have it on Facebook, but I will add it there, and I'll add it to our email this week. Diana, you're seeing the screen, correct? You're seeing the
I
website?
think so.
Okay.
We have a hard time hearing.
JoAnn, were you here when
We will work on that.
I was a little girl.
Okay.
I was going to the Baptist church, but Aunt Edna and Uncle Raleigh came here.
Okay.
And Mary's friend from Marshall College came here
If that's
to
okay,
the college gatherings, and Mary came with me to some
So that's why I knew when it was.
So if you want to see this again, you can find it at our website.
It actually is on our Facebook. It's the Springfield house, it's on the side. Brady is maybe in that picture, that's mom.
He is in there.
Recognize some people, but I'm sure some of them can.
It was on Facebook years ago.
See our fireplace. The music stuff made me cry.
I love that.
When was that too? I love it.
I can't remember now.
Is that Ruthie?
Which bridge is that?
Must be,
Thurman?
no,
Back
It
to
doesn't look like
Michigan
Thurman.
Center.
it was probably, Jim Long was the minister.
Okay.
I think.
But there was one before him when we moved here. He died this year.
Durwood Hoffman.
Durwood Hoffman.
Yes.
And I'm
Would
not
you
sure.
like to see the very first part?
I think I saw him in there.
That very first part when they were talking about, the people, because see if you could pick out Grady in that little, those gifts.
On the porch scene, I know Brady's on that scene.
Could we see just a little bit?
And Pat too. She looks like Elkie. Pat does.
This porch scene or another
Yeah.
porch?
The porch scene, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Brady and Pat are standing on the porch.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Oh, are you on the front row there?
She looks like Elkie.
I think I see her.
I think I do too.
She said she had her pocketbook in front of her.
Is she the one holding the big pocketbook?
Yeah.
No, I think she's the one next to that, to the left.
Oh.
I see Diane is on the Raleigh.
Yeah, Edna and Raleigh are in there.
Well, where, I think that's Raleigh comes up.
He's in the seat,
I could be wrong,
but that's him. And there's right behind.
And the Andrews.
Which one are you? In the dark with the white curtains, right there.
Helene and Lee Andrews should be in there.
Where's Grady?
Is this Grady's mother?
Yeah,
And
Yeah,
where's Grady?
yeah. Grady's up on the porch.
somewhere.
And Clyde, this is Clyde right here.
That's Grady.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is Grady right here.
He had hair.
And that's Clyde.
He has brown hair.
And Raleigh, this is
I think
Raleigh.
that's Raleigh.
This is Jerwood Hopper,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
right here.
You know all of it.
Yeah, he
Well,
took
say
me
that-
to the hospital when I had tied it, so he could hold it, because I wanted her to be baptized right away when I could go.
Incidentally, there's a wonderful picture in this directory. This is the 1971 directory. There's a wonderful picture of Grady and Etta and Heidi and Elkie, who is a little tiny baby. It's so cute. It's a wonderful picture of them.
So it does us good to look back and to connect as much as we can with people we knew.
I think this lady right here is Berger Holcomb. You remember Berger Holcomb?
I know the
She's a member of
name.
this
I know
church.
the name.
She-
I would have to give you a
Connie, she's in the directory.
And
So-
is Vista Stein, Vista might be this little
If I
right
can
here.
get close enough, I recognize it.
She was, I'm looking at an odd angle and I can't see. But
All
that's
right.
definitely Grady, right there. You
All
handsome dude.
Are any of them house in there?
No, that's pretty
You
nice.
have beautiful hair, beautiful hair, beautiful.
And Connie was right, Gerwood Hoffler was the minister from 63 to 67.
Yes.
And
And
that
then
was-
Jim Long came.
Actually, let's see,
And we were the first family taken into the church when Jim Long came.
I don't remember John.
When was the church, I know we'll get to, when was this building finished? What year?
this is 1874 was when John.
66, I
In the
think.
middle of that, when it was.
Say that again.
Okay.
Was this building built in 66?
By 65, the time had come to build a more nearly adequate plant. So the fall of that year, the old remodeled building was ceremonially burned, which is all.
Right.
And on October 3rd, 65, ground was broken for a $77,000 structure. That's what it was called.
Does it say how many square feet it is?
He had Sunday school in the old
It
times.
says designed by
I was
Henry,
a Sunday school teacher.
designed by Henry McDonald of Brevard. He won some kind of big reward for this building and some others.
There's a copy of that in the next room.
And I love this next sentence.
Found it in spring.
Oh, okay.
I love this next sentence. It says, this new undertaking created a fervor of interest and support, both within the congregation and in others who believed in the worth of such dreams.
Dreams, not realities. Dreams.
Yeah.
It tells where the financial support came
Do
from.
you see,
And
do you see Helene?
Connie was right. On October 2nd, 1966, the first worship services were held in this building.
In six, I thought it was 66. See, Bob and I were here when they had the ceremonial burning, when they probably made this picture. And the college had told us that there was no Methodist church, and they really expected us to go to the Baptist church. You know, this is a Baptist school. And so I said, well, I won't join it, but I'll go up there until I can find me a Methodist church. And Mrs. Raleigh English, right there, Edna, right next to, this is Raleigh and that's Edna. She was teaching school up there. And when I started teaching in March of 1966, she told me, I said, the only thing, they said, how do you like Mars Hill? And I said, I love Mars Hill, but I just miss my Methodist church. And she stood up and she said, whoa, we have a Methodist church. And that was when I found out this was, see, the sign wasn't out there. And I didn't know this was a Methodist church.
Well, it was,
That's
yeah.
Lee.
Andrews.
You'll have to give
Lee taught the Sunday school class to the adults. And Brady's mama was in there. And Lee was still teaching when my mother and father-in-law moved here. And my mother-in-law was in that class. But Berger Holcomb was a member. Remember Berger? She lived right around being right behind Main Street.
She's in these older directors.
Yeah, yeah.
His part was the Sunday school.
But did you
teacher.
get right in front of
Yeah.
you?
So
Think
I
about
can't find Helen.
the size of that group there. How many people would you estimate are up there right now?
40, Matt.
Yeah, 50, 60.
40 or 50, yeah, maybe 60.
Okay, and our congregation on its best days,
Not quite that.
55, maybe, on its very,
Well,
very
there's
best.
another comment on the congregation. When we first came to this church, which was in 72, you had to get here on time to get a seat. The congregation, the pews were all full, and they put folding chairs.
They even pulled the couches, every chair
So how
in the
many
whole
people are you
building
talking
right here.
Well, I don't know, 150, something like that.
Easily, because that sanctuary would sit.
But the other thing to know is that probably half of those were college students.
Right,
And that was in the day when college students came to church.
came to church.
So that's why,
But we filled it all the way back to these sliding glass doors, all the way through. And this thing wasn't here, you know.
Would you be willing to bring the picture books and so forth back one Sunday so we can
sure.
kind of,
I think you'd
if we
enjoy it.
promise to behave?
I think you'll behave, especially the ones in the 70s are entertaining because some of us are in those. But,
Yeah.
and one
And
of
we
the
have
things that
different
I'm
color
on,
hair.
yes, we did.
Brady's not the only one that has different color hair, the rest of us do.
This one in 1978 is a favorite of mine, and I found this in it. I have no idea how it got there. I guess I put it there sometime, probably in 78. Anyway, it says refugees reach Mars Hill, and that's the Tyvitchik family, our
Yes.
church sponsor.
Yes.
Ree, were you here when that?
Yeah.
Jim
I used
Hall
to
was-
bring her to the little preschool with me.
And I had Pusabai, my 7th grade class.
There was quite a family. There were 8 of them.
Yeah, they did not speak any English. We had to teach them English.
Where were they from?
They were from
Laos.
Laos, yeah.
But
And
there
they
was-
lived out on South Main Street in the little house with the slanted roof. And they kept the heat up to, they got here in November, if I remember correctly. And when they got off the plane out at the Asheville airport, it was snowing and they had never seen snow before. And we had coats and things for them and they kept the temperature in there up in the 80s because they were just freezing to, they had never seen such
Talks
cold
about
weather.
that in this article. It talks about
Does
that.
it? Yeah. And they'd walk along Main Street here, back toward town, and they would pick what we call weeds to cook. But it wasn't herbs. It was little, yeah, dandelions. You remember that? And they would pick that, and we said, what are you doing with that? Because everybody was saying, what are those people picking the weeds for? You know, and they were cooking.
My neighbor, I had some people staying with me that asked if they could go down and pick the stinging nettle. And I said, you can have all the stinging nettle you want. And she cooked it, and it was delicious.
Wow.
It was really good.
Oh,
Was it right up there with
the
the
brick
greens.
house kind? The brick house with?
Yeah, that little brick house that sits out near the road. Yeah, next to behind the zinc.
When they left here, they went down to the area of Hickory where there was a whole community of Laotian people. And they're still there, not too many years ago, maybe 10 years ago. They came back here and prepared a dinner for the congregation.
Yes, for the whole congregation.
They became very successful, I think, and have food-related businesses in somewhere down in that part of the state.
And Pusaval, the little girl that was in my class, had married and had a baby. And when they came back, she, you know, but all the teachers in the school put sign like desk DESK, you know, and we would put sign window, you know, to teach them the English. And the little boys were fabulous at math. They just had a real brain for the math.
So the fact that this church was so supportive probably helped the community to accept them and help them if they needed you all.
Well, we were their official sponsors.
That's what I'm saying.
We weren't just supporting them, we were
We
officially.
brought them here.
We were officially.
But with the church
their sponsor.
doing that probably helped the community to be more
Yes.
accepting of them.
And Jim Bowles was a great leader
Yeah.
of that effort.
Just to enter one other little thing on our push. This is I guess we call it a newsletter from 1978. It's just kind of interesting to go back and read what was being said in 1978 about various things that were going on in the church. So I'll leave that and the refugee paper in this 78 yearbook. And so
I have a suggestion. Let's each look for, because let's face it, we're old members of this church for the most part. But let's, no matter if you joined 2 years ago or 25 or even 40 years ago, let's think about something that we have as a special memory or something that we have tangible that we could show from that time and bring it next week and we'll have a show and tell about our history, as well as finishing up this little questionnaire where we can. So we know when it was formed and we know where it was formed, right? And how many members at formation? 18. Okay. Did you know any of those on that first group?
Yeah, maybe.
Those
And
of us
how
who are
many members was it?
18.
18.
I'm gonna give you all a copy of this list.
Oh, good.
The Powells were here during the formation.
No, they were not charter members. Oh, I'm sorry,
Charlie and
Charlie
Ernie
and,
weren't.
they were.
Not their parents, they came a little bit later. But Charlie and Ernie, so Francis and Ernie, I think were charter members. Is that right, Grady?
Yeah,
Francis?
the charter members are all listed here in this paper I'm gonna give you,
Okay, okay.
including Francis and Ernie and Charlie and JoAnn.
JoAnn, yeah.
So the question, in what year did our church have the most members?
The Jim Long years.
But we know that we had to bring in extra seating.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the reason for that big number of?
The college.
The college
students.
maybe counted for half?
Yes.
But I bet that if we counted local community members who were members of the church, that would have been about the heyday for that too.
It was.
So
Julia Holcomb, Grady, was Julia Holcomb on the porch? In that picture?
so,
I think she was too.
because she was here when I came.
Yeah, and she played the piano.
So you can pull that up on your iPad.
She's in
See if I can
71.
get her.
Yeah, she was here and played the piano back then.
Okay, so what has changed to help explain why we don't have as many members now as we had, let's say, in 1980?
But what is the number right now?
It's 50-ish.
50-ish.
I mean, people that actually members
Members.
that don't come. but-
Well,
How do
Yeah, if you
you, how do
add
you
other-
determine the number of members? What does this mean to be a member? Does it mean that you come to the church and participate? Does it mean that you have your name in a special place in a special book as being a member of the church?
Or you just attend?
Or you just,
Well, when you say members, I mean, I count everybody who comes. In my mind, you are a part of this church. But I think officially, the Methodists consider you a member when you join the church.
Right.
So your name would be in the book, you know.
And Susan has the book, right?
actually, no, Barbara has the book.
I didn't know.
okay, bring it next Sunday.
Is there another copy someplace else?
I think there's just one copy.
There should be another copy.
Actually, there was an old book, and Barbara, did you buy the new book? I don't have the new book right here, but she bought a new book. So there are actually two books. There's the old, I guess it was.
For security reasons, I mean, something happens sometimes.
Yeah, I've got both of them at the house.
But they're at your house. If anything happened at your house, I hope it doesn't.
If anything happened to the church, they'd be gone too.
I know, but we need 2 copies, is what I'm saying.
Well, maybe, I'll bring it back and send it, because I'll be through with her then.
Okay, so what has changed that might help to explain the difference in our membership?
Fewer people just go to got a lousy pastor.
Society.
Yeah.
That's the what?
Got a lousy pastor right now.
Well, there's not the enrollment in any establishments, regional churches across not just our county, but
And it's
the
not
country,
just
the world.
Methodist. It's not just Methodist, it's all the churches. Young people have pulled away from church, and I think that's the reason for the difference in
I
numbers.
think that's a real reason here, because the college students, as I understand it, and I don't have close contact, somebody else, Joel, may know better than I, or JoAnn, but I think that there are very relatively few college students here who attend church regularly, and a lot of the ones who do seek out a different type of church. They seek out the type of contemporary worship, or possibly even more conservative ideas. So I think that the culture at the college has changed vastly from 1974, 75.
It really has, and I think the culture has changed all over the country.
Yes.
I think in general, all of the young people have pulled back.
Let me say though, I think that there are exceptions to that rule, because the church that I attended in Memphis is over 2,000 in membership. And a lot of that, and they had a very active youth group. And that youth group is led by my sons still love their youth director.
And there's something about that time in the development of the brain and the memory or whatever that makes that especially important.
What is their style of worship? Is it traditional, or do they have multiple styles?
It's mostly traditional.
The one that I go to sometimes in Arlington, a lot of it has 2 separate styles of worship. They have what's called the way, which meets in a different part of the church at a different time, and it's very contemporary. And then there's the traditional.
Well, now Christ Methodist in Memphis has that, but unless it's been a change since I was there, which has been a while, the youth participated in the traditional service, and they had a huge youth choir, and still do, and children's choirs all took part in the service.
Well, that's because the families raised their children in the church. Like I went to Sunday school, I went to church, I went to NYL, I went to Sunday night service, went to Wednesday service. And families came with little kids,
right,
teenagers, and we were brought up in the church. And it was just, and I think that's what we miss here, not just college students, but the young families, to have those kids who, participate in all these different activities.
I think it's also a question of, the question was, why did young people move away from the church? Maybe the question should be, did the church move away from people? And when we look at it and examine it that way, it may be a question. So for instance, one of the things that's changed in recent years is a lot of states have dropped blue light laws, or various businesses have stopped observing blue light laws. I'm not talking about the alcohol aspect of that. But, 10, 15 years ago, nothing was open on Sunday.
Right.
Now, Sunday's the day that people go to brunch. Sunday's the day that people go out and hike. And if church is at a time at 11:15 a.m. on Sunday, and that is the only time that you can do or have church, then experiencing new ways of doing and being church like we had to do over the last 2 years may be a new way of thinking about that. Not just online, but some churches, there's a really successful church in the United Methodist Church between I believe it's in Holston Conference right next to us over in Tennessee. They have an Appalachian Trail church. It is a chaplain on the Appalachian Trail who meets with hikers and connects with them. There are churches, and I was at annual conference the past 2 days as a delegate from the district, but there are churches that are doing dinner church. They're meeting people because there are people who have been hurt by the church, or there are people, and there were stories about that, or people who have turned away from the church because of various experiences that will not step foot in a church building. And so some of these churches are doing dinner churches out in the community. They're doing other aspects of taking things out to people and meeting them where they are. So it's an experience of how do we find new ways of doing and being church as part of that. And there are grants if we're interested in thinking about that. Rich Ashley, who actually represented our charge from Brightwood Laurel, and I were briefly talking, there could be an opportunity if we are interested. One of the new churches that have sort of sprung up along the way that is not a church with a pastor and a pulpit is in an area that we held last fall, Crusoe, right down the road outside of Canton. And one of the ways that people are experiencing new ways of doing church there is taking a work and ministry team out to Crusoe to help people recover, whether it's doing some painting or cleaning up or finding new ways of helping people experience their house. And I think you're right, Susan, about, yes, part of it's a move from contemporary worship, but from what little I understand, which isn't much, I admit, but today's youth are starting to sort of turn away from that more contemporary aspect and look toward the more traditional aspect. So the baby boomer generation sort of went toward the more contemporary worship, and now the Gen Z and the Gen Y are starting to come back to the traditional aspects of worship.
What do you think's driving that?
It's a good question. I think it's one, there's an additional sort of new move towards spirituality and not necessarily having to experience things as a group. I think that's one of the reasons that the United Methodist Church was so successful during the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even into the 60s and a little bit of the 70s, is we had a convergent society. We had World War II that was, hey, let's plant a victory garden. What are we going to need to do to get to victory together? And then we had Vietnam. And I feel like everything changed right about Vietnam and heading into the 80s. We were no longer convergent. How do we come together to do this? We started to do that a little bit after 9/11. I think we started to do that a little bit during, at the beginning of the pandemic, and then we sort of went back to our divergent ways. What's in it for me? What can I get out of this? What do I want to experience with this? So I think there's a little bit of that divergent experience with that traditional aspect as opposed to coming together and holding hands. There's that individual experience with it. And then the churches that I feel like we've seen be more successful at that time are those who are finding radical ways of being welcoming and experiencing their community around them. So they're pursuing social justice, and it's people who are, and that doesn't mean going out doing mission trips and things of that nature. It may just mean being visible in the community at places that people don't expect churches to show up. Like we did, I think we did a really great job of that at the college fair that we had, or that we participated in with Marshall University. We had gender pronoun, and sort of like we talked about last week, and those things went like hotcakes off of there. And to see a church be visible, to recognize that people may identify as other genders, or to see a A rainbow flag or a Black Lives Matter sign associated with a church is something that some of these students at Marsville University aren't used to. I'll say one more thing and then I'll hush. I had the opportunity, Lisa Baldwin told me she was going to do it, and then she told me, to speak at there's always a Reconciling Ministries luncheon at annual conference. And this year there were probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 100 people from throughout the conference who were interested in Reconciling Ministries Network, and they wanted examples of what churches are doing and how churches are experiencing Reconciling Ministries. And I spoke on behalf of Marsville United Methodist Church, and I had to recalculate my math because I was trying to think about when I first started started attending in 2016, right after the church had become a Reconciling Church, and today, I think I redid my math with the help of Lisa, and we were thinking, originally I was thinking our in-person attendance had grown by about 15%. I believe our in-person attendance, since we've become a Reconciling Church, it's nowhere near where it was in the 60s, but I believe our in-person attendance has grown by about 20 or 25% since we've become a Reconciling Church. Our online attendance has more than doubled our in-person attendance, and so we've got now a worship community more than double of what we would have had 3 years ago. And if you look around you with our Sunday school class, our Sunday school class has more than doubled since the beginning of the pandemic. And if you look at other factors like our giving, I may misspeak with this, Susan, so correct me if I'm wrong, but we seem to be on, at least trending toward to be on track to potentially meet our budget for the second year when we haven't been able to meet our budget in prior years and we've experienced a deficit. So we are experiencing, I think in some ways, a new awakening of what it means to be church, do church, and how the church is seen. That I shared that, and I had at least three people come up to me. One was a football player at Marsville University who couldn't believe that we had that experience at the college fair and that we were able to do that. One was a pastor of another church who has a family who's moving to Marsville, who are going to be on the faculty and wanted to put us in touch with that. And then another was coming up to say, do you have any suggestions about what we should think about in being pursuing a Reconciling Church for our particular church?
That's very encouraging. I was afraid you were going to say we need another World War IV.
Emily, what has happened to the style?
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I was in a meeting with Kyle Ritter, who is the musician at All Souls. This was about 10 years ago. And the question was about they're publishing a new hymnal across the Episcopal Church. And they had this survey, and the National Committee came back, and as a result of their information, they said, the church says, no, we don't need a new hymnal. And the most interesting thing was that the 30-year-olds and below were the ones who said we need to sing everything that's in there, including the Gregorian chant. And the church music conference I attended maybe 10 years ago as well said that this pendulum about the conservative church has about reached its peak and is going to begin to swing back. And I think the younger generations have missed out on structure and liturgy, and I think that's what they're seeking and returning to church in a traditional sense to a degree, leaving the unstructured, and they're just seeking something different.
And it's interesting that when we look at our college attendees, many times they have a connection with the music program.
With the what?
With the music program,
Mm-hmm.
so that it's great to have them too. We would miss that sorely. I think it's we doing for the average college kid? The one who's out there majoring in something like social work or whatever.
Like clinic?
Yes.
Or I think that's a great question. That goes back to the question of, has the church left the youth, or maybe not right the youth, moved right of the youth, but or how do we meet people where they are? Maybe it's thinking about this year, we're out there at move-in, and whether we can help in sort of this new COVID world of moving students in, or whether we can just be there to hand out bottled water and have a cooling station or something of that nature that just says, welcome, we're glad you're here. We're not asking you to come to church, we're just saying, welcome to the Marsville community.
And identifying us as being where we are, because it is possible to be a student at Marsville College and never come out this street.
You know, I just happened to think of one other thing that's kind of irrelevant. I thoroughly agree with what Keith was just saying. But one thing that probably was a real big factor in so many college students taking part in this church was that Jim Long, our minister, was also an employee at the college. And I think he was worked half-time or part-time at the college. And so there was a direct connection there. Of course,
And he had a college group that met, that he called the Koinonia crowd. And they would have supper up here on Sunday night, and he would bring them in, and a lot of kids really identified with him. You know, he really reached out to those students, and I know we would provide like a spaghetti supper one night, a hot dog, so it wasn't anything big deal, but they were given a little supper. And they met in the fireside area right there with Jim every Sunday night.
And I think Shasta is working, doesn't she have a connection with the college?
Her and Lisa have been working on that with Stephanie.
And that would be the way to go.
And part of that is even reframing that, like a traditional college ministry. That may not be the way to go. I mean, it's the way to go to work through Stephanie, yes, but a traditional college ministry again, we're sort of in this new world. You've got things online, other new things for people to explore. They can get to Asheville easily now, more than ever, except for gas prices. But when you're competing with that, how do we meet students where they are? And part of that may be, Paula had this idea based on experience that Paul has had, and that may be adopting an athletic team that otherwise doesn't get attention, like a women's volleyball team or a women's tennis team, and showing up to their games to support them when no one else shows up to their games, ensuring that they get fed, and just finding a new way to experience community together.
And I think it's important that we remember how to chew gum and walk at the same time, because we have many things that we really need to be addressing. And another one is, what about children between the ages of 6 and 13, 15, whatever. When's the last time you saw a child eat?
Well, we've seen a couple of babies, but the last child I remember here was I think his position is like vice president or provost of Marsville University. And I really thought we would see them come back, because I attended a tea with the lady, and she is a professor at Marsville. And she announced to the other ladies at the tea, and all of them went to this Baptist church up here, and I said, I remember we met, you came to our church. She said, yes. And she said, we plan to come back. And some of the other ladies said, oh, well, you'll have to come. And she said, no, we are not Baptist. And she made that very clear, and I just wanted to laugh, but I didn't.
But what did we have to offer those children now?
But we have the preschool. Do not any of the preschool children, the families don't attend here?
Not a single one.
But you've got to remember, in Madison County, families that
are from here or live here and work that have children that age are usually Baptists.
Yeah.
That go to church. This is just Baptist country. And almost all of those kids, if they go to church, they're Baptists. But they do love coming here.
Yeah,
And the fact that we honor them on a couple of Sundays a year, and they come. But they go to these country Baptist churches for the most part. And
let's ask Rhea a question. Rhea,
Oh, gosh, that must have been bad.
both of your grandchildren have come to the preschool here, right?
All of them, our children and grandchildren, yes.
All of your children, but your children also came to church here.
Yes, and my grandchildren do not go to church anywhere. They are not members of the church.
Have they ever been
They have not
invited
been
by anyone but
baptized.
you to come to this church?
Yes. Well, I don't know about invited. I told them things.
They grew up
No, anybody but you, she said. Has
Oh.
anybody invited them other than you?
I don't know unless it would be through the preschool. There's nothing sent out through the preschool. That would not be appropriate. I do not think.
Okay,
That would
I'm
not be
not
appropriate.
questioning that
Appropriate.
because
It's independent.
Susan came here because of that, right?
Yeah, my daughter was a little odd when she was 4 years old. I was afraid she was gonna be too shy and never go to school. And our next door neighbor was the one who started this preschool, and Beth loved her, and so she came to the preschool, therefore she felt comfortable here, therefore we started coming to church here. Yeah. Still here. Yeah.
Are you wondering about the children at preschool?
Or I'm wondering about why we don't have any children in our congregation.
Oh, I think part of it is we no longer offer, you've already been talking about this, we don't offer the Sunday school.
Read your newsletter. Somebody wrote a really good article about that.
No, I've got a soapbox on
But it also is very difficult for us to do that.
Because someone comes
most
with
of
a
us-
child, we're awkward.
Well,